I'm a lean, mean speed thingy.
Welcome to So There I Was.
That's how all great aviation tales begin.
You're damn right it is. And this is episode 50.
50.
Holy cow. 50.
And yeah, so that's at least 350 tales because I figure we're averaging 6 tales a show.
At least at a
I
minimum.
could be wrong.
Well,
quick back of the napkin pilot math there.
You may be underestimating. I'm not sure, and I'm not going to swear to anything at this point. But episode 50, another great interview with naval aviator, former Harrier pilot, SLAF.
Indeed. And the cool thing about SLAF is he's second generation, huh, Fig? So
that's right. And as a precursor, we're trying to get SLAF Senior on in a few weeks. We're trying to nail him down for an interview right now.
Flew Banshees, F9F Panthers, and he's agreed to come chat with us too in the near future. So we'll
SLAF's got a great history. He's got a lot of great stories, and I don't think we even got close to getting them all on being recorded. You know, he starts with being a gearhead car guy.
Yep.
Morphed into working on a T-33, got an airplane ride at the end when it was flyable. And
got that thing up and running. His dad said, "Don't you dare get in."
Don't you do it. And he did it.
He said he went out and pulled 6 Gs in a loop, and he says, "I got to do this for a living."
No, I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, we all do. We're like, okay, I got to do that again and again, and again. Yes. And SLAF's had some, I don't want to run it, but wow, he saw a lot in his gun squadron years.
Yeah, well, his first week in the gun squadron, he watched 2 airplanes leave and 1 airplane come back, and 1 guy come back in the back of a helicopter, all nice and wet. And let's just say they violated their 500-foot safety bubble during their ACM air combat maneuvering flight. So that was his first week in the gun squadron. Then they went out to Yuma on a det, and he watched a guy eject. His first thought was, this week's show title, right?
Why is there a hot air balloon in the traffic pattern? And as a side note, as how small this aviation world really is, a mere 2 weeks ago, I'm given a check ride in the simulator, and he found out I had a Harrier background, and he said, "Hey, I was at a Harrier base once in Yuma, and I saw this airplane going across the ground, crashed into the parking lot, pilot ejected," and I'm saying, "What year was that?" And it was the exact same incident that SLAF witnessed.
Aviation is a small world. And it's even smaller when you start getting into tactical aviation. But boy, is this fun to get all these stories down. I'm looking forward to more. We've got, remember Chaos? He talked to us about W.R. Spicer in his book, Sea Stories of a U.S. Marine. We've got him coming up soon as well.
Yes.
So we're just loaded with good stuff. And people keep writing into us. We've got someone else coming up who is an author and a retired American Airlines captain, and he's got a fascinating life story. So I'm looking forward to that, too.
I can't wait to hear those stories either.
Yeah. But I think we ought to get out of the way and let SLAF tell his stories here. So sit back, relax, make sure you're not sitting on that ejection handle.
Don't sit on it.
Here comes episode 50, heading your way.
On the tanker, through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that. Thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fun.
So there I was.
Which is how all great aviation tales begin. Welcome. This is Fig, coming to you from Kansas City. Where are you? Where's my co-horse today?
Greetings from Seattle. RePete here out in Seattle. Glad to be back with everybody. In fact, Fig, I want to just take a quick note of personal interest. We got some feedback on our Facebook page from a gent named Marcus in Westford, Vermont. And he sent me a picture of his 9-year-old son, Sebastian, who listens to our show with him. And it says, Sebastian gets upset when I listen without him. He says, you guys are awesome. And this has quickly become my favorite podcast. Sebastian gets pissed when I listen without him as well. So keep up the outstanding content and you make my Thursdays great. And then he sent me a picture of Sebastian right after he got a helicopter ride to school on his 9th birthday.
Whoa. Did you say helicopter ride to school?
He did. He got a helicopter ride to school on his 9th birthday. So, man, that is a family that's going to be dialed into aviation. Sebastian's one of our future aviators, I can tell already. So, so that's cool stuff. And another cool thing is our guest today, SLAF, fellow Harrier pilot, coming to us from the Dallas area. Welcome, SLAF.
Well, it's great to be here.
Glad you could join us.
I don't know about you, but I always like hearing stories from our fellow Harrier brethren. And I know SLAF's got some good ones.
They're scarier. The Harriers are scarier.
only for the uninitiated. That's right.
There you go. Absolutely. So welcome, SLAF. We got to begin with the standard question. How'd you get interested in aviation, and how is it you wound up in the Marines flying Harriers?
Wow. My dad was a NAVCAD, and he grew up in the Midwest, and he went into the NAVCAD program with just 2 years of college. And when he got his wings, they said, hey, we need some guys to go fly for the Marine Corps. And he and his buddies said, well, what are we flying? And they said, well, you're gonna, there's a squadron that's going to a med cruise, 1957 med cruise, and you're gonna be flying Banshees. And originally they were supposed to go on the STOL, but then it got changed to the Lake Champlain, which was one of the last straight deck carriers.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
So that was a really neat thing. And I know you just read that letter on one of the episodes about a very similar guy. 1954 is when my dad was a NAVCAD. He was one of the first guys to go through the T-28. So all that was kind of in my growing up years. And, his stories and everything. There I was, 50,000 feet with nothing running but my wristwatch. And,
right.
Took his Banshee up to 50,000 feet and flamed both engines out. So he has some great stories. He's still around. He's lived outside of Tucson. And, but when you're a kid, I wish I would have listened to my dad more. Because after he got out of active duty,
it's amazing how much smarter our parents get after we turn 25 to 30, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Well, he didn't have a 4-year degree, and he got off of active duty, and he went to Purdue and worked his way through college at Purdue, where I was born in Lafayette, Indiana, flying for the Air Guard, flying F-84s for the Air Guard and telling stories about landing Banshees on the boat at night.
Nice.
And so I wish I would have listened to that part about the Air Guard a little bit more carefully.
I can't tell you how many people that ask me, about essentially mentoring them, what's my path? What's my best path? I hammer the Air Guard home so much. If I had known then what I know now, hey, look, I love being a Marine officer. I love the opportunity to fly the Harrier. But if flying is your number one goal and flying cool airplanes, go Air Guard. Beg, borrow, steal, do whatever you have to do to get Air Guard. Am I right or am I right? I mean, you guys know.
So I can't speak for what it's like right now, but I know, back in the day, things are a little different now, but
sure they are.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I didn't listen to that part, but growing up, I was a motorhead. I was working on cars. My big plan was just to be an auto mechanic. That was, going through high school. That's what I wanted to do. And then I got mixed up working with this guy who owned a body shop. And on the side, he was putting together a T-33, which is 2-seat, single engine, straight wing. And he was putting that thing together down in San Jose. And on the weekends, Saturday morning, I'd go over to his place. We'd load up the car with airplane parts and go work on the jet. And we finally got the thing flying, and they flew it over to Oakland, and the FAA letter of agreement to fly it. We had to put 25 hours on this thing. And so it's flying. And my dad, by the way, said, do not fly in that airplane. Don't do it. And luckily I was 18 and way smarter than anybody else, right?
Well, all 18-year-olds are. Yeah.
Yeah. Took that under advisement, but my turn for a backseat ride in that thing came up, and we blasted off and flew over the Bay Bridge and out over the Golden Gate Bridge and up towards Point Reyes, one of the whiskey areas, the warning areas up there.
Yep.
And this guy, we pulled 6 Gs in a loop, and it was like, holy cow. I mean, I was like, God,
Oh, you're hooked.
I have to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Was the body shop guy the guy flying it?
No.
The guy that had. Okay. So
No.
there was somebody else that was qualified.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was an old, and this thing, once we got the thing flying, boy, it attracted a bunch of guys that wanted to fly the jet. And the scheme with this jet to make money was he was going to make a T-33 flying club. And this is in the late 70s. So for a mere $3,000, you can join the club and you can fly it for basically fuel and tires. And the FAA wasn't really that happy about that.
There's that whole type rating thing on a pure jet you need, but
yeah, in the training program. So anyway, that kind of went along, but it was really neat because it did expose me to a lot of really cool aviation. I mean, there was a guy that actually flew it that operated a P-51 out of Sonoma Sky Park, which is up by Napa. And, I got a ride in the back of that thing. There was another rich guy in Oakland that had a T-28 and, rode around in that. And they're all flirting with me to fly this jet. Like I have any input on that.
Right.
So, yeah. So that's what really tripped the trigger. And then I started asking guys, it's like, well, what do I have to do to go do this in the service and do this, the right way? 4-year degree. It's like, ooh,
son of a bad word.
Yeah. I had a 3-digit SAT score, like not low 3 digits, but it was not good. And,
well, you probably never applied yourself.
Yeah, I wasn't that excited about that. I was mildly dyslexic, like most pilots are. We're mildly dyslexic, but good with our hands and spatial orientation and such. For anybody out there, like the young guy that wrote in, and our future naval aviators, don't let any of this stuff stop you.
Right. That's exactly right. This is a perseverance game.
It is. And the service, my OSO, the officer selection office, he said, Scott, that door will just keep getting narrower and narrower as you progress. Just don't bump into the sides. Just try to stay in the center and get through it. And,
really nice.
Yeah, we've all done that. We're lucky enough to have done that, and sometimes you bump into one like you did, RePete, where you had to delay to go to flight school. I don't know if I could have done that, but that's the perseverance. It's like, and sometimes those experiences really turn out to be maybe some of the neatest experiences that you have.
I'll give you that, I was livid when I wound up having to go to the fleet for 3 years, and then, almost lost the flight contract completely. And I was getting ready to get out when I managed to get orders to flight school back. And it's like, then, should I stay or should I go? And I'm like, yeah, you'll never have an opportunity like this again. You take it and go. So that's why I did, but I seriously considered not going to flight school, which blows my mind in retrospect. I look at that, go, right. Man, that would have been a dumb mistake, but
spite. It was spite.
Yeah, part of it. Yeah. I'd put all this effort in and got nothing out of it. It's like, well, why would I keep putting effort in, but then I went, then the wiser of me, wiser side said, hey, you are not going to get this opportunity again. You better grab it by the short hairs while you can. So,
Yeah.
Hey, I want to take a quick diversion, SLAF, and ask, you mentioned your dad. Your dad's still with us. Might we hear from him at any point?
Yeah, I've thought about that. I did introduce him to your podcast.
Okay.
He listened to, of course, he knows Lawman. I know Lawman really pretty well, and he knew him from when I went through flight school, in the same time frame. So he listened to those episodes, and also the latest one where the flight of 4 took on the 3 MiG kills with.
Yeah, 4 MiG kills. 1 V6
4 MiG kills.
4 MiG kills.
Yeah. Which is, he was about 5 years ahead of him, maybe 10 years ahead of my dad. And, but yeah, I will definitely see if he's interested, which I think he would be.
That would be awesome to hear from some of that vintage of naval aviation. Is those guys are gods. They're gods. They really are.
Yeah,
the stuff
like
they went through and
now.
survived. Yeah, and that they survived. I mean, I don't know if you remember when we did our 50th anniversary. Was the first time I found out that our squadron lost 4 airplanes on its very first day of carrier calls. One day.
Are you talking about the Panthers?
The Panthers. They lost 4 Panthers in one day going to the carrier. The very first squadron got the 223 got the Panthers. Yes. And they went to the carrier to do carrier calls and lost 4 airplanes that day.
Yeah. And then they went to the club.
Yeah. Right? Oh.
It was, what a
different world. So.
Yeah, it is a different world. Definitely.
So you went to Kingsville for jet training. And I saw in your email, was that Rosemary Mariner? Was that Tammy Joe's kind of a mentor? RePete? That name sounded familiar.
Yes. Yeah, Commander Mariner.
And she was the OPSO of VT-23 when SLAF checked in there, I think.
No kidding.
Right,
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess she was a pretty sharp gal.
She was the first, right?
Yeah.
She was the first female naval aviator. And I didn't know that going through. She didn't wear it on her sleeve or anything. She was just, nice professional naval aviator, as they should be. Tut was her husband, Tommy Mariner, was the OPSO of VT-22.
Okay. All right.
I flew with Rosemary maybe a couple of times. When I was in 23, VT-23 was just a blur. They put me on some kind of super fast track. They needed one more guy to go to the boat. So they just ran me through to get to go to the boat. And we went to the Kitty Hawk in the T2. Then I went to VT-22. Tut, Tits Up Tommy, is what his call sign is.
Love it.
Super nice guy. He was the OPSO. It was a good squadron. We had a good squadron. But you're just kind of a passenger as a student going through the squadron. Yeah, but it's where, it's your formative years where the antics of the instructors are what's kind of forming your naval aviation flavor, I think, right?
Yeah.
They were fun-loving guys. But one of the things, and I mentioned this in my email to you, Fig, was very early on. I remember waking up and it was Saturday morning and we got a call from a friend. And there had been a midair at night FCLPs at Kingsville. Are you guys familiar with that mishap?
No.
Yeah.
I remember when that happened. My mother was actually an emergency room nurse at the Kingsville Hospital when that happened.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very sobering, like all mishaps are, but this one particularly because the Marine that was involved was a MECEP, just walked on water. So MECEP is, what is it? Marine enlisted commissioning program.
Yeah.
Commissioning program.
Yeah.
And
it's the creme de la creme.
Aerospace engineer from Purdue. This guy was, wife and young child and young boy, I think. He was flying the pattern where he was supposed to be, and the other guy took off. They turned off the runway lights. He turned downwind, couldn't really see anything, was somewhat disoriented, got way wide in the pattern, and he's flying his pattern, and the guys in the shack he's calling out Clara because he can't see the ball.
Yep.
They're like, "You're looking good. Keep it coming." They were looking at John Orlandi, who was in the right place. And finally, the other guy took his own wave off right into the bottom of John's airplane, and they were both killed. But I kind of said to myself, "This is a serious business. This can be a lot of fun. I get it, but this is a deadly serious business. Not to put a damper on everything. Nobody's shooting at you. So maybe I was a little bit more serious than I should have been through my aviation career, but that's just what forms you and makes that part of your history."
No, it is. And I think most of us in naval aviation, regardless of what fleet we went to, some more so than others, but most of us lost a lot of friends. It was tragic in that sense. And to this day, it's a dangerous business. But man, is it rewarding. When you do get to do it, there's nothing like it in the world. So,
yeah.
So what was it like? So you got winged down there in Kingsville, and in your email you said you had gone to see the senior Marine, and the next thing you know, he had the Harrier Rag CO on the phone.
Yeah,
something like that. How did that go?
Well, what is it? Yeah, I got winged, and then the selection came up, and I went. He was the senior Marine, was the AMO at VT-22 at the time. I went down to his office and chatted with him, and I don't know, maybe he gave me the news. It was kind of a blur there. He might have given me the news that I got Harriers, and he goes, "Well, let's call up Capito up there at 203." So he calls VMAT 203, and before you know it, John Capito, Bambi's on the line, and then he hands me the phone. It's like, Caps was super gregarious, and just a great guy.
Absolutely.
And
we lost him in the last. It might be over a year now, just a little over a year now. But that was sad.
I was impressed by even getting to talk to him, and he's like, "Hey, get your butt up here, and we need you to start flying the jet." It was kind of late in the year, so there was a little, we had to go through the holidays and everything, and got up there. And there was a little bit of delay before we started the RAG, and they had to get 7 lieutenants together before we could start. That's what it was.
Of course.
You had 7 lieutenants and a lieutenant colonel in your RAG class.
Yeah. So we had Spike was a lieutenant colonel, and we had Mags, Spud, Flat Top, Tron,
Skivvies,
Skivvies, and myself. Is that 7?
Rump.
I think that's
Tom Rumping.
Rump. Yeah. So we were waiting to start the RAG, and then we all started the RAG and went through together, and they called us Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs because Spike had gray hair, and we were just trailing around like little puppies and everything. But I became really good friends with Tron, and Tron and I remember we would study together, and we would sit and we would drill each other on the throttle box. The throttle box was still there, where the throttle quadrant where you do all your procedures with the nozzles and everything. And I thought that was a good thing. One of the kind of confession in the RAG, I had my first operational navigation, right? Doing a low level through North Carolina. And everybody's like, "Oh man, it's so easy. You got the INS, you just go from point to point, just plug them in right. You're good to go. Easy." So, and I have a map and everything, and I studied it and plug all the points in, right? I get ready to taxi, and I look down, and I taxied about a couple of feet, and I'm like, shoot. I was still in a line on the nav switch. I hadn't gone to nav on my INS.
You just introduced a little error in the
and I'm thinking to myself, how bad can that be?
2 feet.
2 feet.
Yeah, a couple feet.
What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
And Greyhound was chasing me in a 2-seater, and it was just a freaking disaster. I was so I got to do that one again. That was my first and only down. So got to do that one again. But you're like one of just a couple people that know the true story on that one. Get Greyhound on.
How about that? We're trying to get Greyhound.
We have gotten Greyhound a microphone and a headset. We're dying to get him on. He calls me with a funny story now and then. I'm like, Greyhound, I'm just going to start recording our phone calls here because you have some amazing stories. We've got to get them down. So be prepared to wrap your ribs up with tape before you listen to that episode.
Yeah, that's good. He was one of the more fun guys in the Rag Squadron.
He was our XO when we checked into to VMA 223.
And if you walked into the ready room when he was in there holding court, you could just kiss the rest of your morning or afternoon goodbye because stories were on.
I think that's everywhere that he was.
Yes.
I didn't go to this last reunion, but the one that was in Pensacola. I went to that. He was yucking it up there pretty well. Yeah. And so the RAG was a lot of fun. All the 7 lieutenants, we made it out, pretty much unscathed. And then in the group's infinite wisdom, they sent us all to 542.
Wow.
542 was just getting brand new airplanes. And Buck Tabor was the CO when they had the A models, and he had just a super great squadron. And those guys came down. Face, Fitzgerald, he was WTI down there. Beans was down there. Samurai. And
Samurai was a RAG instructor when we went to the RAG.
Yeah.
So we all walked down the street as en masse. I don't know, in retrospect, if that was the best way to do things, because we kind of had our own flavor as a bunch of knucklehead lieutenants, and we might have been a little bit difficult to get under control. Yeah. I remember I checked into the squadron, and maybe the first day I was down there in the squadron, it was a Friday. We weren't obviously flying or anything. And Face and Hawk were going out to fight with, do some DACT dissimilar with Lancer in the warning areas. Lancer, fighter pilot, right?
Right. So let me back up ever so briefly while you get your thoughts together. DACT, different or differential air combat training. So we would go out and fight another airframe. It wasn't another Harrier. We'd go out and fight A4s. Dissimilar. So it could be anything, F-16s, F-18s, F-14s, whatever. But it was not a Harrier is the point, is we went out and did air combat maneuvering against other airframes. So I relinquished my soapbox. Sorry.
So Face goes down in the chalk. So now it's 2v1 the hard way for Hawk, right? So he goes out there, and maybe get Hawk on here too. I mean, I'm sure he's got some good stories. I think it was the first merge with Lancer, and all of a sudden we get word back in the ready room that he's gone down out there. Hawk has.
Oof.
And so they launch a SAR and everything goes into motion, and good shoot. And SAR picks him up in the water out there. Well, Lancer comes back and he parks his Hornet, which came up from Beaufort. So he would frag a Hornet to come up from Beaufort and a tanker. And on Friday afternoons, he would go out there and line up fights up and down the street, right?
Right.
And he comes into the ready room. I remember Lancer comes into the ready room. He's holding that big VHS tape in his hand. I got it all on tape. And it's like, whoa, it was pretty exciting being in a fleet, just one day in a fleet, right?
Yeah, this is day one.
This is day one. I walk out onto the line to see his airplane. His airplane looks good, but the left horizontal stab looks like somebody took a bandsaw and cut off about maybe a third of it.
Wow.
The left horizontal stab. Just a clean chop. And what had happened, Lancer, according to Hawk, crossed
his nose.
Hawk's nose a couple of times to the merge.
Oh.
And finally, Hawk nosed over, unloaded. Lancer's left horizontal stab took off half of Hawk's right wing. And that was a kill for the Hornet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lancer thought
Sounds like the 500-foot bubble might have been slightly violated. I could be wrong.
Small.
Well, Lancer said that he thought he just thumped him. And the tapes showed a little bit different story. They convened a board, and there was a 2-star on the board because Lancer was a 1-star. They said, okay, don't do that anymore, you guys. Okay. And
wow.
Continue on. Right.
Wow.
So that was pretty exciting introduction to.
Yeah. Welcome to the fleet.
Yeah. So the progression, we started flying, and our first deployment, just CONUS deployment, weapons dead, out to Yuma. We'll go out to Yuma and, race around the Chocolate Mountains and
drop some live ordnance, use some good weather, lots of ranges.
Yeah, lots of ranges and everything. So there I was on a really nice day. We're going to go out and shoot some rockets, just 2.75-inch Zunis. The lead is Stryker, who was our Brit Exchange guy, Stryker Moran. Dash 2 was Rump, and I was Dash 3. And we blast off, and we head out there to the raked range. We shoot our rockets. Rump shoots both packs. Both Stryker and I had a hung pack. We couldn't shoot the rockets. No rockets would come out. So we had to come back in for a hung ordnance straight in. And they're landing towards the north at Yuma. Or what is that? Kind of the northeast?
Yeah.
Northwest.
Yeah, it was like runway 3.
So we're coming back, and we get all joined up, and then we had brief. We'll just take separation on final. We do that, and I go down to 50 nozzles and start taking separation, and Rump does the same thing. And we're all got a pretty nice interval. And Stryker, he briefed, he said, hey, land on the center line of the runway. Then when you have everything under control, just ease off to the side that de-arming's on, and we'll get de-armed. So Stryker, he lands on the center line, and I'm kind of watching this and just kind of 60 nozzles, just motoring along at 100 knots or whatever. Rump lands. And I'm watching him, and Rump lands, and rather than pulling off to the right side of the runway, his airplane starts going over to the left side of the runway. Oh. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this guy is always doing something different. It was just like, okay, wonder what he's doing. And I'm watching with a little bit more intently. He's not really correcting back to the runway. It's heading off towards the side of the runway. And then I'm thinking, oh, man, well, to myself, these are all silent thoughts. I hope he gets the motor shut down so he doesn't fog the motor as he goes off the runway. Yeah. There's no big threat there. The next thing, I better start going around. So I start coming up on the power, and I look out my front windscreen, and I'm thinking to myself, what is this hot air balloon doing in the airport traffic area?
Oh, boy. I know what that
Orange, white, and green hot air balloon. And luckily, before I could key the mic, I see seat man separation.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, holy shit. And I transmit to Stryker. I'm like, Rump's ejected. And now tower's going crazy. Crash, 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 crash on the field. And they're like, everybody depart the airport traffic area. And they call me, depart the airport traffic area, turn left, blah, blah, blah. I look at my gas, and I got 1,500 pounds of gas, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had another gas tower.
Yeah. So I say, I'll just go ahead and, delta overhead. So I'll just orbit overhead until they get this taken care of. I can take a couple spins in the pattern. Right. And they said, okay, yeah, do that. And I'm just still going around, and I'm watching Rump's airplane motocross through the desert. And it's motocross, and it's kicking up all kinds of dust. And then it starts turning back towards the east side of the field over where the hangars are. Well, we're on the west runway, and there's quite a bit of terrain in between the two runways. And I'm like, well, it'll never make it across all of that. And
unless it does.
Unless it does. Then it starts making another turn back to the left into the wind, because it was a left to right crosswind. And it starts heading towards the McDonnell Douglas test facility. Oh. McDonnell Douglas, they got a building, a big parking lot, maybe 100 cars.
Boy. Yeah.
And I'm looking at, now I'm almost a beam the jet thinking to myself, what can I do to stop this catastrophe that's about to happen? And I am looking at it, and it's like, it is gonna wipe out this building. It's headed right for it.
Oh boy, that's terrifying.
It's like a car crash. I couldn't watch.
Good look away. No,
I couldn't watch anymore. So I fly, and I'm expecting. And now it's time to turn downwind, and I turn downwind expecting to see flames and people running out of the building on fire and everything. And I don't. I see the airplane. It's over next to the building, and crash fire rescue's right there, and there's foam and everything by the airplane. And then I came back around, and I landed and did a slow landing, probably the worst landing of my life, and then pulled off the de-arming. And what had happened was the airplane got wrangled by a chain link fence. One of the Laos 7s hit the back of a sedan. The other one hit the back of a van, and it stopped. The nose stopped about 6 inches from the corner of the building.
Wow.
It was miraculous. That was our first little deployment, kind of exciting. So it's somewhat of a tradition when somebody jumps out of a jet and they survive it, right? They buy a barrel of beer at the club that evening. So Rump had gone through all of his stuff, and we all show up at the club that night, and he buys a keg for the squadron, and we're all there and we're talking. We kind of, licking our wounds and talking about the whole thing. The end of that whole story, they were having nose wheel steering issues with the Harrier at the time. It wasn't castering properly, and that's what they chalked it up to. He was lucky to get out of it. His maybe a little critical. He shouldn't have tried to go around, or maybe pull the power back to idle before he decided to shell the jet. But
so that was going to be a question of mine. So the power was up when he ejected. That's why it was like beating across the
that's right
across the airfield at a high rate of speed.
The power was the thought was his thought process was to go around.
Yeah. And
the spool up was just so slow that he was looking at the edge of the runway before he could do that. You
said let's go back a few minutes. You said you thought, hey, what's this hot air balloon doing here? So how close was this? Was it just off your left, your front left, like 10 o'clock, like right here? I mean, when he ejected?
It was, I didn't think I was in danger of nailing the chute or anything, but it was in my lower left quarter panel. If you had a quarter panel in the wind, it was just the weirdest thing, because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just appeared.
You're not supposed to be ballooning on the field.
Yeah, I'm just happy I didn't key the mic and put it on the record until now. But those were my thoughts. When I think back to being a squadron pilot and how fast responsibility was thrust upon you in the squadron, just the needs of what was going on in the squadron. Heck, I got there in September, and the skipper sent me to safety school the next April, which
so you've been there 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm the safety officer. Do you know and I was still a lieutenant. I was still a first lieutenant.
Yeah.
And you know who DSS was, the director of standardization and safety at the squadron? Tron.
There you go.
The other lieutenant.
The other lieutenant.
Beautiful. That was always a good job, though. I did safety, and the beautiful thing about that was, regardless of rank, you always had the skipper's ear. You could walk into his office and go, "This is screwed up. This needs to get fixed. This is going to be a problem." And as long as you were serious about your job, the skipper would take you seriously. Of course, they didn't generally send you to safety school if they thought you were a knucklehead, so that was a good thing. But
so you must have been the least of all the 7 knuckleheads that showed up because they sent you to safety school and they made Tron the NATOS guy.
Yeah, we had a good time. That kind of leads into the next "so there I was" story. What do they say? Within 3 months of getting done with safety school, you're going to be investigating a mishap.
Yep.
We had a deployment out. We did a CAC. So we went out to 29 Palms, whole squadron. That's 29 Palms to the combined arm exercise.
There we go. Thank you. I was going to go. I don't think we've covered that. CACs combined exercise.
Yeah. Sleeping in tents, living in the desert, but good flying, really good flying, actually. I'm fixing to walk for my afternoon flight, and I'm walking from my tent up to the ops tent to get a Jeep to go across the field. I look in the distance, and there's a big black cloud of smoke.
Oh, boy.
And I'm like, okay, one of two really bad things. It's only us, and there was a helicopter squadron that was there. And I was thinking either we lost a Harrier or possibly a bunch of Marines just got killed in their helicopter. Because generally that doesn't end up very well.
No.
So the first things what happened is I get to the ops, and they're running SLAF. We lost a jet. Okay. Is the pilot okay? What's going on? And I go, yeah, it's out at Surprise Springs, and the pilot ejected safely. He's okay. Okay. Who is it? Rump. Second airplane.
Strike two.
Second airplane in about 11 months. I'm like, So my CACs turned into a lot of message traffic and picking up airplane parts and getting the mishap investigation going and everything. That one actually turned out to be the digital electronic fuel control. What happened on this was, real briefly, the fuel metering unit, which is the hydromechanical piece of the puzzle that actually meters the fuel into the engine, but digitally controlled, that thing locked up, and it gave him about 55% power. And it locked up when he was doing a downwind entry into Surprise Springs. And then when he was coming around the approach turn, he came up on the power, and basically the RPM was locked at 55%.
Oh, geez.
And it settled until paddle said eject, from power to eject, right?
Yeah, right.
Unfortunately, he did about everything in the cockpit except select manual fuel. But that was all the problem.
20/20 hindsight, though, is what it boils down to.
It is.
Point. When you've got a handful of airplane and it's coming out of the sky.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of time to think about everything.
Yeah.
The question is, would he ever get out of another one? Was really the question that they had to ask. So there was no punitive. They just said, yeah, this is probably, maybe look for something else to do in the Marine.
Probably about an inch and a half shorter too, after 2 ejections in that short a time.
That was unfortunate for Rump. There's a little bit more to that story, but for another time, maybe. So in 542, in the 2 years, I was in the squadron for just a little bit over 2 years, we lost 4 jets.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, I take that back. The first one, Rump's first, the runway excursion, that was Class B, and they put it back together.
Okay.
So we didn't lose that. That wasn't strike on that. But there was Hawk, Rump, 2 Rumps, and then Skivvies, which was bad. Our skipper was Muff. He's retired, obviously, and super great guy. But we got back from that CACs, and I remember sitting in the office. The wing DSS came down and was reading the riot act to our skipper, Muff, that he hadn't gotten any message traffic, and that the 2 lieutenants in his safety office were just screwing everything up and need to get better help, basically, more responsible help. But to Muff's credit, he said, get out of my office and don't ever come back.
Good for him.
Yeah. So again, that's tough kind of leadership. Really good skippers that you see from really good skippers. At that time, I think Tripp was the XO. So
my favorite Marine Corps squadron commander.
Yeah.
SLAF, in your email to me, some of the stories you said after the first 2 years, then everybody started getting bad deals coming at them. I'm guessing fact tours, non-flying tours, and guys were just threatening to get out so they wouldn't have to take a bad deal. Tell us about that.
The time in the squadron was really so short. It went by in a flash, and all of a sudden these fact tours are coming down, or training command tours. That's what happened to Mags, was probably one of the first guys to go. There was, I won't say who it was, but we used to say that a bad deal came down towards this guy, and he's like, well, I'm going to resign. I'm getting out. I'm not going to be able to do the fact tour. And then once it went to somebody else, and he took it back, and we joked about him having a laminated resignation letter that he was using. I had a relationship with 203 CO Ben Mayer at the time. Ben's gone. He passed away several years ago, but I worked for him at the group when I was waiting to start the RAG. He was the group director of standardization and safety. So maybe that's how I got my safety stamp. He was a CEO of the RAG. And as I saw kind of the writing on the wall and looking for how things were going to pan out, I talked to him, and he said, man, SLAF, I'd love to have you come down and I'll get you out of safety. And why don't you come down and work for me? That was an opportunity I really couldn't pass up. And so I took it. And that was really interesting.
RAG instructor, yeah. Oh, well, RePete can attest to that.
That was probably my favorite job in the Marine Corps, was teaching in the RAG, because even though a student would try to kill you now and then, by their very nature, they're going to do stuff that's unexpected, and that's why you're there to teach them. I learned more about flying the Harrier teaching it than I ever did learning it and actually operating it.
Yeah, I agree. You never learn something as well as when you have to teach it.
Right.
The time in the RAG was a lot of fun. In the schedule writing shop, I was lucky because Spiko came in there, and we started writing a schedule together. And that guy just is the driest sense of humor and a lot of fun to work with. We had a pretty good gig. Lovey was the OPSO. Okay. Was he still around? Does that ring a bell?
Colonel Lovejoy. Yeah. Hound was always a big fan.
He let us run the show. We did what we needed to. We got the job done. The RAG was kind of neat because Ryder was WTI, and he got us doing stuff. He had a big push to get the RAG back to being tactical, which was really neat. We did a weapons deployment out to Fallon. We loaded up with blue bombs. We had tankers, and we were going to hit the Razorback ranges, dive off the tankers, do a short low level into the Razorback ranges, and drop the blue bombs, and then join up with the tankers and keep going out to Fallon. That was just kind of unheard of with your typical transcon that you do, especially in a training command or in a training squadron. But it was really, really fun. And then, the different students really have their own flavor. We had some guys, I think we were getting just the beginning of what we referred to as the Top Gun recruitees into the RAG.
Yeah.
Okay. We had one guy shows up on a Ninja, and he's a really great guy. We had one guy that showed up. This guy's got a DeLorean, but they're all kind of, show me to my fighter, where's my fighter? Beautiful. Yeah. So we had a good time with all that. The other thing is my last year in, we got tagged for quite a few air shows. So I did the air show thing, which was one of those things that I always wanted to do. Back to when I was getting into flying, I went to an air show at Moffett Field with my dad, and the weather was horrible, kind of low, rainy, Northern California weather. And the Blues were there, but before the Blues flew, he said, "Hey, Scott, you need to watch this next airplane." And a guy in a green suit walks out, gets in a green airplane, funny looking airplane, and blasts off and does the Harrier Level 3 demo.
Yeah.
And it was like, holy cow.
Wait a minute. Airplanes can't do that. What the hell? Yes. Jet aircraft can't do that. That's not possible.
It was the early seed for the Harrier that kind of got me going. I mean, I wasn't laser beam focused on flying Harriers, but it was one of those things I look back, I go, yeah, maybe that's what it was. And to be able to go and do that during my flying career was I was really lucky to be able to do that. I had an air show partner, buddy of mine, Buck. We would go out and you might know him. He was still in the.
Oh yeah,
he stayed in for a little while.
Yeah, Buck.
Yeah.
He was over at the company I work for. I used to see him
That's
all the
right.
time.
I almost just said where he is.
Yeah, I know where he is right now. He's lucky to be around after his incident in Chicago there. Yeah. I talked to him a while back, but Buck and I did a bunch of air shows. We did Beckley, West Virginia. I remember we're in Beckley. It's like, why are the Thunderbirds, Harriers, and the A-10 demo team in Beckley, West Virginia?
Yeah, I did that show with Hound one year.
Did you?
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well,
they
who's
must
the
have a big high level senator or something that's
who was Armed
Bird,
Forces Appropriations? Yeah, it was Bird.
Robert Bird. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That explains it.
So
I got a funny story about Beckley when you're done.
So the demo team's there, and Buck and I, we were kind of palling around with those guys too, and they had their crew chief. And right before they leave, they're heading down, and they're all talking about how they got to go meet a general down in at MacDill or something like this for their next show. And Mike and I, we grab a Marine Corps sticker and we put it on the nose of one of the A-10s, and then on the gear pod of the other one. I mean, what's the first thing the general's going to do? You look at an A-10, you walk out, you look at the gun, right? And what's he going to see there? This Marine Corps stick.
Nice, love it.
But yeah, what did you do in Beckley?
So, thinking of, let me go to the paint, the sticker one first. There was a reserve squadron that used to paint paw prints when you would come park on their line on an overnight. You'd come back to your airplane the next day. There would be paw prints from their squadron painted onto your airplane. Just, so you knew where you'd been. But, so we're in Beckley, and Greyhound and I are standing there by the airplane, and this kid comes up, and he probably 17 years old, maybe 18, and he's got his private license, and he's all full of himself, and he's looking at it. He goes, "Oh, that airplane's not much bigger than the 172 I fly." He goes, "Yeah, I could probably fly that thing. I can fly anything there is. I could fly that airplane easy." Hound looks at him and goes, "That airplane would chew you up and spit you out before you got to the end of the runway, son." Yeah, he was pretty full of himself. A Hound just wasn't having any of it. It's like, yeah, not quite.
Yeah. So, 172 pilot. There you go.
Right. I could fly that thing. That's not much bigger than what I fly. It'd be easy. I don't think so.
Vapor. Was he a student when you were a RAG instructor?
Yeah. He was a student.
Did he get his call sign in the RAG?
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Did you hear the story on that one?
We need to get him on too, but yeah.
Get him on. Maybe he'll tell it to you, but it was not what you think.
Okay.
It was a low fuel state. Really.
Well, that's what I was thinking on vapors.
Yeah. Or he's just shit hot coming into the break.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
That's the wrong kind of vapor.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the probably the one of the funnest air show stories we have. We're doing this air show in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and Buck and I, and it was a long weekend, so we couldn't go back to Cherry Point. It was closed until Monday. And we talked to the air show guys and go, we really need to leave early. We've already flown. We flew the show on Sunday. He goes, "We really need to leave before you guys get done. We're going to Patrick. We're going to overnight there." They go, "Well, could you do a formation flyby for us?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, We'll do a formation flyby for you.
Why, yes, we can.
So it kind of reminds me a little bit of the story you told about the St. Louis airport, Fig. But so I go to Buck, I go, look, this would be a great time to try that high speed, low speed thing that the Blue Angels do. We'll do a stream stow. We'll go out. We'll come back into the break. You break, you slow down and fly your normal pattern. I'll extend out and come back around for the high speed part of it. You just stay on the inside of the runway, and I won't cross the center line, and I'll stay on the crowd side of the runway. And I remember, so we break. I keep the power in the corner, and I extend out. And all I remember hearing was, "Come on, SLAF, come on, hurry up, hurry up." And I'm like, I'm going as fast as I can, Buck, to catch up. It didn't work out exactly how the Blue Angels do it, but it was close.
Yeah.
One airplane went by really slow, one went by really fast. But,
hey, for the non-Harrier aviators listening, stream stow. Can you describe what that means?
Oh, yeah. So rather than doing a section takeoff or a formation takeoff, we would separate by, was it 1,000 feet?
I seem to recall about 1,000 feet. Might have been
1,000 feet. One would line up on either side of the runway. The lead we do all of our run-ups and our checks. The lead would say rolling, rolling, go. That's when you put the power in a corner. Both guys did it simultaneously. You're rolling down the runway, and then you got to your nozzle rotation speed, and both guys would rotate the nozzles, pop up, and then the lead would give a couple percent, and then you could join up on them. Generally by the end of the runway, right?
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a perfect description. Hey, and one more thing.
And a stow being what's called a short takeoff. So
yeah, it's just acronym.
Oh yeah. Short takeoff.
Yeah.
Usually takes a few hundred feet.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
No more than 300, really.
We've heard reference over and over to putting it up in the corner, putting the power in the corner. So what does that mean? Putting the power in the corner. Describe that.
Wow. Put the power in the corner. Yes. So I guess the cockpit's got four corners, right? So I think it came from the
put it up in the left-hand corner.
Up in the left-hand corner.
As far as it'll go, right?
As far as it'll go, yeah.
Military power, firewall power.
Yeah. You have
not through the
limiters. Not through the limiters. That's right. Yeah.
So there were limiters on the airplane. Naturally, you'd go all the way forward, and it would go to max power, and the digital engine control unit, the DECU, would keep the engine from over temping, overcooking itself. If you got in trouble, you could go through that limiter, and the engine will give you all it had, no matter the temp. And that was a quick way to destroy a multi-million-dollar engine.
But
if you left it up there too long, you'd save the airplane, lose the engine, save the airplane, and that's why it was there.
So many foot-pounds of pressure pushing forward would break that little would trip the switch.
Yeah, there was a little spring plunger, right? And you pushed against that, and then it just hit the little switch at the end there. Yeah.
You go. Okay, I'll give you all I got. I'll give you all I got, Captain.
It's all coming back. I don't know if I had to trip the limiters. I had one where I was doing a hover check. Did you guys see PMCF, hover check?
RePete was.
Yep.
Yeah. So you had to do a hover check, and it was the water didn't flow, and it was hot, and I was a little bit too heavy, and I just need a little bit more temperature without water.
We had a 90-gallon water tank. I think it was 90. It was either 90 or 60.
500.
It was 500 pounds. So it was more like a 60-gallon water tank, good for up to 90 seconds of flow, or it was a 90-gallon good for 60
gallons.
But yes.
Right.
Okay.
50 and
500 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
10 pounds a gallon. Distilled water. Had to be distilled
It had to be
water.
distilled water, and it would get injected into the engine to cool it, so you could run the engine just a little faster and get a little more thrust out of it. And it seemed to recall, given on a standard day, standard temperature, all that, it was worth 1,500 pounds more thrust, wasn't it? It was a lot.
1,500 pounds of extra thrust.
Yeah. But it was one of those single point failures that, if the water pump didn't work, then
you were in a sandwich quickly.
Yeah, maybe you're going to go through the limit or something. Yeah. But that was all fun. What a great design on that airplane, though, to do all that. I have the F-35s fly over my house out here. They build them right over here at Lockheed Martin. Right. And it still gives me shivers to see that, but that's a totally different program on that, the way that thing flies.
A little more computerized. Few million more lines of code in that than in the AV-8.
Yeah.
Well, SLAF, I'm looking at your email with all these little different information parts of your career. It looks like you literally got off active duty about the time I was checking into the RAG in Cherry Point.
I think so. Yeah, March of 1990.
Yeah.
That's
about when I checked in, and Bear was the admin officer.
Yeah.
And he says, I got good news and bad news, Lieutenant. What do you want first? And I'm thinking, well, go ahead and give me the bad news, because I'm thinking I'm going to be the rifle range safety officer for the next 3 months or something. He goes, well, the bad news is you're not going to start for a few months. Okay, what's the good news? Here it comes, right? And he told me I was going to go get stashed next door at that little Hams 32 squadron.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I got to do that. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, when I was waiting around, I flew around in the OA4.
That's fun.
Yeah, that was good. A good little thing to do. I was always a bagger. I was, from the very beginning, even when I was held back in the training command, if I was on a flight schedule, I was in there begging for a back seat in something. And a lot of guys went to the beach and stuff and did other stuff, but my whole time flying, I wanted to fly airplanes. And so I did that. And I remember Rick Rodecker gave me my first backseat ride in T-88A. And when we did that short takeoff, and then when he came back and he did a vertical landing, I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to do this. I don't know if I will be able to keep up with this thing or move the stick enough to do a vertical landing. It was just, I was spreading my legs to make sure I didn't hit the stick. He's moving it around so much.
Yeah, but the A was a little more unstable, right? In the hover. I never flew that.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It was like the B with the stab aug off.
Yeah.
If you ever did that.
The SAS.
Yeah, stability augmentation. Yeah, 3. Yeah, but with that off, it was similar to that.
Yeah, that's what I was told. Well, no wonder. Hey, I just had real quick. I had a flash there. Bear took me for a ride. My first ride in the Harrier. I just jumped in the back seat with him. He was in the T-Bird. He was leading a couple of guys out to the range and then back. And we had gone. And I had the same kind of thoughts that you did. It was like, I don't know how the hell I'm going to be able to do this. I mean, the takeoff, it was like, holy shit. We accelerated fast. And then, of course, we came back and we landed on a pad, and then he taxied out of the way real quick to watch the students land in the single seaters. And we came in pretty fast and we decelerated pretty rapidly. And then he put it down on the pad, and I'm thinking, holy shit, what just happened? But I had to tell you this to get you, because remember they had the hot pits.
Yeah.
They fuel you up. You go through the hot pit, which is you leave the engine running, you pull in, they drag the fuel over, they give you fuel, and then you'd go park, and it was already fueled. So we're sitting in the hot pits, and I'm sitting in the back seat, and I'm just sitting there, and Bear's going, the plane captain or the Marine that's fueling us, he's sitting. There's one guy standing right off to the left, and he's looking right up at me, because I guess he thought I was the instructor. And he goes, "Hey, Bear goes, show him one finger. No, hold up 2 fingers now." And,
which
I don't know
which one.
So I'm holding up fingers. And he goes.
You didn't flip him off, did you, Fig?
No. He's telling me to give this guy all the signals that mean absolutely nothing, and I've got this poor kid down here standing next to us, going, "What in the actual hell is he trying to tell me?"
Nice. Oh,
Yep.
That's funny.
Good times.
I actually had my first ride with Tim Shea, the Brit Exchange pilot. And he came in, and he was determined to impress me. So we did a braking stop hover, 15 degrees nose down.
What?
There is a face full of dirt when you're 15 degrees nose down. Doesn't seem like much. You got a face full of dirt when you're hovering.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really a neat airplane. So much you could do with it. I remember telling students, because guys would get a little bit frustrated or whatever. And it was my observation that the Harrier took average hands could fly the Harrier, but it took above average head work. There was so many single point, procedural errors that would put it into the dirt that unlike any other airplane. I mean, what's the difference between a 70-degree day and a 90-degree day in a Hornet? A couple 100 feet of deck roll.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
You know, in a Harrier, you go to the pad and you didn't take that into account. You're a passenger. It happened to friends of mine. I mean,
yeah.
Landing short of the pad. It was, just crazy. So these little headwork errors that guys would make was a high, I think it was it was a threat that was not addressed nearly enough, I think, for our guys.
I would say that's a very fair observation. That you're absolutely right. And you could get good at that airplane. And, with a couple 100 hours, you could be very good at the airplane, but you could find yourself in extremis pretty quickly if you didn't take everything into account every time you took it up.
Yeah. Well, I think through mitigation technique was they started making minimum cutting scores before they would even let a guy go to the rag.
Yeah.
That was maybe a way to mitigate some of that. Average guy can look like a pretty shit hot guy in a Hornet, but an average guy could look like a pretty smoking hole real fast in a Harrier, right?
Yeah. Over the airplane's history, they went through a lot of that. Remember, there was a period of time when it was all second tour aviators in the Aviate A. They were trying to
second tour.
Yeah, second guys. Tour. And then they were like, well, nobody junior to a major, I mean, it was, they tried everything. And then when I was going for it, you had to have no downs in a training command, a good AQT FAR score, aviation qualification test, flight aptitude rating, or 2 points above squadron average. Any one of them. So I didn't have any downs. I had a good AQT FAR, but I was squadron average. And that's what they were taking in the Harrier when I did it. And then when I went back as a RAG instructor, it was wide open. And they're like, we're taking everybody because it's the Aviate B and we're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know. What was it for you, RePete? What was that like? Do you recall?
Of course, it's been 25 years, but I've got to say that my recollection was the guys coming through when I was teaching they were outstanding. We didn't have really any weak hands in the bunch.
When you were in the RAG, I was in Kingsville instructing, and I can tell you that they weren't letting guys select Harriers. They weren't at the top.
Yeah,
actually, some guys were getting Harriers that didn't want Harriers because they had better scores than some of the other Marines.
Yeah, that was a funny thing too. They had Harriers also had to be your top choice. I went through when I selected, if it was Hornets and Harriers, you weren't getting the Harriers. Yeah. You're going to get your third choice if you didn't get Hornets.
Okay.
that's kind of, so there I was. That's kind of ancestor worship a little bit. These guys are trying everything to make it as safe as possible. But yeah, the guys that really tried hard, again, I think great aviators that went there, and great guys that just were in the wrong spot at the wrong time. I mean, you think about what happened to Indian. His canopy imploded. It was a T-Aviate-A. He was racing around low level, flight surgeon in the back seat, canopy imploded, uncommanded ejection for him, killed him, and the flight surgeon didn't get out either.
Oh my gosh.
And then they restricted him down to, I don't know, 250 knots or something like that was the fix for that. But who else? So, skivvies. What happened to skivvies shouldn't have happened. That was the first fatality. I think that was the first fatality we had in Aviate-B was skivvies.
What was the scenario on that mishap?
It was air to air, beautiful day. I remember like it was yesterday, and
he turned off the Q field.
Oh, was it the SAS?
Yeah, Q
turned
field
off the pitch?
And the roll.
Yeah,
the roll channel.
Thinking because he could roll faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, good tactical advantage fighting another Harrier.
Yeah, so let me jump in real quick and explain what that is, and then if you'll explain the rest of the scenario, because you're more familiar with it than I think Fig and me. But so the Q field, Q is the mathematical expression for airspeed in the airplane. The faster you go, the harder it is going to be to pull in a cable operated airplane. Well, with a hydraulic airplane, you move the stick and it's just going to move the control surface 3,000 psi, and it's going to move it instantly to where you want it to go. So the computer goes, no, let's make it a little harder to pull on that stick. The faster you go, the harder it is to pull. But you had the ability to turn that switch off that gave you the feeling of a higher airspeed. So you could just move the stick at will anywhere and it would instantly move the flight control surfaces. So if you'll go to, I turn it back over to you, SLAF, because it ended badly.
The other thing that a lot of guys didn't know, me included, was the Q feel also affects the rudder feel. So the rudder actually gets harder to push at higher airspeeds. And that kind of goes into the contributing factors in that mishap. So I won't go into a lot of details because there's some issues with who was in the flight and everything. But anyway, yeah, Q feel was off, the mechanics of it. Q feel was off, roll was off. And unless you really read the fine print in the NATOPS, the roll channel of the stability augmentation also was part of the departure resistance system. And so if you think about it, if you get a higher angle of attack, if you introduce any roll, you get an instantaneous side slip, and that will cause a departure. So the roll channel would restrict the roll at higher angles of attack as the angle of attack went up so that it wouldn't depart. Yeah, so skivvies left to left with the skipper, beautiful clear day. It's a 2v1. He's the wily bogey. And left to left goes two circle fight, which means one guy turns one way, the other guy turns the other way. You expect to see the guy on the other side of the circle, which can be 5 miles away, right? Yeah. 3 to 5 miles away, two circles.
Depending on your speed, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a dot. It's not like Top Gun. And it's a dot. That's why you need good vision to be able to do this kind of thing. Well, the skipper comes around the two circles and he doesn't see anybody where they're supposed to be. And he sees an airplane that's kind of in a, not real nose low, but a slower nose low spiral. And they calls a knock it off because they think it's an interloper, somebody else in the area that's not in that restricted area that's not part of their flight. Interloper, right? Right. So you call knock it off for an interloper. He watches, skipper's got 4,000 hours of Harrier time, and he watches this airplane and just flies until it crashes into the Neuse River, splashes into the Neuse River. Yeah. So the rest of the story, and that was really hard because there was no ejection, and they couldn't find the pilot. We couldn't find the pilot for 3 days. That was heart-wrenching. So the mechanics of the cause of the whole thing that we came up with was we had the HUD tape through the initial parts of the departure, and it departed. And the injuries that Skivvies had pointed towards hyperextension fractures in his neck, which means his neck was held and his body pulled on his neck and it broke his neck and he was incapacitated. And there was marks on his helmet that matched the screws on the side of the seat, in between the seat and the canopy. And we had a head and neck guy come down and, verify that whole thing and that whole scenario. Yeah. So it's pretty ugly. I mean, you can't invent this stuff, right? You cannot invent what happens in aviation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whoever thought someone would turn that off and it would hurt them. I'll turn this off and I'll be able to put on a wicked bad turn and kick the CO's butt and he'll be impressed with me.
Right.
And,
good
head work,
there was some
bad judgment.
Dynamics with that. Yeah.
So,
that was bad
judgment, I should say.
Yeah, that was tough. But that was the first fatality. That was the first fatality, I think, in the AVAB.
I'll be darned.
And I kind of lost count of ejections after 20 in my short period of time that I was there. But
that's a lot.
That's a lot of airplanes. Yeah.
That's a lot of airplanes, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, let's don't end on this happy note. Give us something funny you saw.
Yeah. So what is really funny? This was funny, and there's a little bit of message in here too. So way back in training command days, Tommy Mariner was our OPSO. We tagged on to a VT-21 weapons det with 4 airplanes from Kingsville and went out to Fallon and got some X's out there. But we only had 4 jets and they're limping along. And we're getting the X's. And I remember we kind of had a bad day. The guys that I was with, we had I don't know what we were doing. It was rockets or strafing, or maybe it was bombing, but we all sucked at it. We went back to the BLQ room. 4 of us, I think 4 or 5 of us, we're all in the room and we're saying how bad this sucks. And I know you're saying where's the funny part of this whole thing, right? But we're talking rather loud. Yeah, this sucks and and we're fixing to go back and they want us to do some low levels on the way back and plan all this stuff. And one of the guys like, I'm not going to freaking plan for low levels and blah, blah, blah.
You aren't going to get to do them anyway.
Yeah.
And right as we're venting on all of this, the door flies open and it's Tommy Mariner. It's Tut. And he freaking reads us the riot act. And he said, you guys will do whatever you're told. And there are people out there that would give their left nut to do what you're doing and get to fly these airplanes and fly around in an A4. And none of you guys are going back in back seats unless you come and talk to me. It was really funny, not funny, haha, but it was funny because I really took it to heart. And I go, he's exactly right. There are people, all those guys that I worked on that T-33 with and back in a civilian in the warbird world that would just give anything to just go for a ride in one of these.
Yeah, just for a ride. Yeah, not even to get to flying for a living, but a ride. Yeah.
Right. And I took that to heart. And of course I went back and I ate a little bit of crow and I begged him to fly back in the backseat of one of the jets. And he allowed me to do that, which I'm grateful for. But it really put it in perspective, what we get to do and how really great that is. It's much less than 1%. It's 1/10 of 1%. And then if you chalk up flying the Harrier in there, but that was kind of one of those things that the funny part of that story is you're sitting in there thinking, thinking you're really smart. And then,
you're all full of yourself, right? That's awesome.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, he rolls in there and brings you back to the real world, which was good. It was good. It was good for me. I don't know if the other guys took it to heart, but I'm just kind of a sensitive kind of guy.
There you go. That's it. A reality.
Yeah.
And a good one at that.
We could tell. We could sense that.
Lawman was supposed to be in the 7 lieutenants, and he ended up he ended up having to have knee surgery because of his Arizona State Trooper injuries, I think. He finally had to get knee surgery. So he got cut out of that. But I just kind of think about how different his path may have been if he would have been in the group with us versus going to 331, because 331 deployed to Westpac right after he got there. I never went to Westpac and never had to go on the boat. We came real close to deploying on the Kennedy as a squadron.
Oh,
but
that would have been different.
Yeah, that kind of, the A6s were getting real tired and they wanted something else. And they came up with the idea to kind of redo that. Remember that Roosevelt 231 as a squadron went on the Roosevelt in the AV-8A.
Right.
They did a cruise on the Roosevelt.
Right.
But so.
But then they decided, well, we don't want to waste big deck space on an airplane that doesn't need a hook or a catapult. So.
Yeah.
Then we were banished forever from those cruises.
Yeah, that's right. But it was it's a fascinating history. I'm glad that you guys are doing this so it gets some of that history out there.
Well, we're thrilled to be doing it, and the feedback has been nothing shy of amazing. It's been a lot of fun, and that's why I'm hoping that perhaps your pop would be willing to come on and share some of that history with us as well.
He's still pretty sharp. I might have to loan him my headphones. They do get guys together. There's a lot of Air Force out there in Arizona and Tucson. He's in the Tucson area, and they get together. And he's given some talks about his days on a carrier. And
well, that would be fun to do, and even to get some of those guys. And if you're listening and you know somebody or you are somebody who's got some stories, these are truly history stories.
Yeah,
some of the things that people did in aviation are amazing. We've been blessed to be able to get them to come and share it with us. Sadly, we're at the end of our ability to spend any more time with you today, SLAF, but I'm hoping you'll come back at some point in the future. Chat some more with us. We've had,
but you're gonna think of 6 stories as soon as it's over. You're gonna think, I should have told him about this time and this time. So that's why the invitation's always open.
And I appreciate that, you guys. Again, you're touching more people than I think you realize. Just real quick, we get together with guys in the neighborhood and get real smart. Couple scotches here and there in front of our fire pits.
It's amazing how much the IQ goes up with scotch.
and we've used your format to get to know some of our neighbors. Just kind of, awesome. How did you get involved? We got a firefighter that lives next door, and how did you get involved in that? Man, it's just a great format.
Everybody has a story.
They do.
Whether you're a aviator or a plumber or whatever, everybody's got stories. So this is for our stories. This is for aviators.
Exactly.
But, yeah. And they're fun. Aviators. They're fun stories. Yeah. Some of them not always so happy, but they're fun, good stories. You had Shiny on here. He was one of my students. All these guys, and Rich Regan, he was one of my contemporaries and everything. I remember.
And all, let me add all aviation too. I talked to a young man the other day he's got his CFI and his CFII, and he's trying to break into professional aviation as something more than an instructor because that pays ever so well. But he wants to move on, and I'm thinking, Fig, he may be a good guy to get on to help some of our younger listeners who think they want to break into aviation to find out what that pathway is if you don't go through the military to get your ratings and become a pilot.
Get them on, man.
Yeah,
get them on here.
Yeah, here are the challenges. Here's where it's tough. Because I know this much. You've got to want to do this. This is not something you can go, I think I'll do that. And I think I'll go pump gas. I think I'll and not trying to denigrate anything anybody does. I think I'll go flip burgers at Wendy's. This is not, aviation is not something you go, I think I'll go do. You got to want it because it's work. It is a lot of brain work and a lot of mental application to get there. You can't just wander into it, I guess is my point.
Yeah, and we're the 3 lucky guys that got to go through it and do it, and right. That's
yeah. It came out the other side.
Came out
the other side in one piece, in spite of our best efforts. So, right? So, yeah. Well, all right. Well, let me close it out here. We've got a couple people we got to acknowledge. The first thing I want to talk about is Rumble. Folks, We're at 97.
Three more.
3 more. You got to
more.
sign up, and I get to quit paying $10 a month so we can live stream to you. Come on, there's 3 of you on Rumble. There's 10 of you on Rumble right now. Come on, make it so. You can help us out.
All 3
here.
friends, for crying out loud. 3
Right?
friends.
Exactly.
It's free.
Sign your mother up. Anything. Hey, you can also find us on Facebook. So there I was.us/Facebook. So there I was.us/Rumble if you're looking for us on Rumble. So there I was.us/Twitter. And you can email us. You can email Fig at sothereiwas.us, or me, repeat at sothereiwas.us, REPETE. Our sponsor is Robin's Bird Brain Designs, custom gifts, etch anything. Get a hold of Robin. Find out how you can put a special personalized touch on your gift to somebody. Show you've put a lot of thought and effort into getting them that perfect personalized gift. Thanks to our friend over at the Mac Geek Gab. Who is that, Fig?
Dave Hamilton.
He's the one that's responsible for all the technology that gets us up and running, and we really, really appreciate it. We couldn't do it.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Yeah. I put up a new page this week, Fig. I don't think you're aware of it yet. So there I was.us/subscribe. So you go to that on your iPhone or your Android phone. You go to so there I was.us/subscribe, and there are links there that you can hit Apple Music, Spotify, iHeart, anywhere that you like to listen to podcasts. There'll be a button there. It'll take you and subscribe in your method of listening.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah. So if you can do it though on Apple Podcasts, we'd really appreciate it, because that's where the homepage is on Apple Podcasts. When you're subscribed to us through there, you can then go on and give us that 5-star rating. Not a 4-star rating, not a 3-star rating. We need that 5-star rating and good reviews. The reviews have been amazing. We're humbled. We're honored. And then lastly, glossary. If there's a term you've heard that you didn't understand and we didn't think to stop and explain to you what it was, write to us. Tell us to get it on the glossary page, and we'll explain what it is. But in the meantime, until next week, everybody, stay safe and
Jack 6.
There I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. No way. When you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
that's what the song says. So long, everybody.
Okay, that's a lawsuit.